But that's not stopping me from doing my walk talk today. So I appreciate you guys watching. For those handful of you checking this video out, do me a favor. I'm waiting to see if this thing actually connects, because sometimes it takes a while it seems, for the stream to actually get rolling here. But if you are watching, let me know where you're watching from. Put in the chat your city and state, or city and country if you happen to be watching from outside the United States. I'm once again wearing my Seahawks Super Bowl 48 beanie we got in New York. And there's the people rolling in. Jacob's going on. Sports State. Should the Seahawks get Baker? Manuel from Denver, Colorado. Tyler Parch. Oh, sorry, Tyler, I'm not doing StreamYard. I'm just doing a regular YouTube stream here. One of these days we'll get that rolling. Manuel Hawks till I die. Lori Cross, always there every morning. What does Lori do to always have the time to watch me in the morning? I always wonder that. Good morning. Got to run to Seattle. Just stopping in to show some Seahawks. Oh, so you got errands to run. I gotcha. Devin. Hey, Devin. Missed you, man. I was really hoping to have your play-by-play when we did the Man Championship. It would have been fun because I ended up winning that game. Some crazy games, a lot of interceptions I got in that game. You would have had fun with it. Marky from down in Texas. Doug Stevens from Chicago. My nephews go to school there in Chicago. Tay Francis from Calais. Not Chief. Watching from high school. You need to be paying attention to your class, my friend. Baker is greater than Russ, says OMF Google. South Dakota. So appreciate that. Keep the chats rolling in as I continue walking here. Herbicide 73 Baker would be awful. Patrick said, morning. Mom is out of the hospital, but having a dang cold. And Tyler's dinner Saturday is going to be barbecue ribs. Nice. His friend's house. Love it. All right. So you look at the sunrise. Kind of pretty, right? A little bit of clouds. Sunrise coming over the east there, over the hill. This is what my neighborhood looks like here. So I want to talk about, Not Chief brings up, like what DK say, stop the Drew Lock slander. I think he's just trying to, it's like where he's getting, Drew Lock's getting crucified before he even has a chance to even step onto the field. Garbage day. I was going to say, yesterday, another blockbuster trade in this very crazy offseason we've had so far in the NFL. Tyreek Hill leaving the Chiefs to go to the Dolphins for some mega bucks. It's a $100 million deal. I mean, it was a lot. One of the biggest receiver contracts. It's just amazing how much money is being spent on these singular positions, but these guys are game changers. Actually, this helps. Well, obviously the Dolphins benefit by getting one of the fastest receivers out there, upping their chances here. And the Chiefs are going to take a hit now, because when you think about Patrick Mahomes and a lot of the success he's had, that's kind of like the Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers connection. Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill, what's that going to look like? I mean, he's still a good quarterback, but again, just like quarterback's only as good as the weapons and protection around him, quarterback's also only as good as the guys he can throw to, and vice versa. So it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to how the loss of Hill will affect the Chiefs' future moving forward. And of course, I'm sure made Wilson happy knowing that the Chiefs were going to take a slight downgrade now that he's in the AFC West. But I was thinking about yesterday. Last night I had a couple of friends, neighbor friends of mine, And one of them is he's both a Vikings fan since he's from Minnesota. His name's Jeff. He's probably not listening, but if he was, hey Jeff, what's up? He's also a season ticket holder for the Seahawks. And let me just say that Jeff is certainly one of those guys who's very real, but he is the type that when it comes to the Seahawks, the cynicism runs real thick. He's one of the most cynical fans I know. So he's had a lot of negative things to say, dating back, not just this past year, but even the years before that. He'll be the "we're doomed" voice when it comes to analyzing the Seahawks. Hard to get a positive thing out of him. So yesterday, we had some stuff going back and forth about how the Seahawks are terrible. They look like they are trying to not winning is not part of their game plan, and joked about Pete Carroll if his plan is to have Geno Smith come back and compete for the starting quarterback position. Well, clearly that's a great way to put that not winning plan into place. Anyway, it went on and on like that for a little bit. So it got me thinking, is he right? Are we really screwed? I mean, I went through this in my own mindset as well when I was thinking about, just processing the loss of Russell Wilson, in the days following. That's all I could think of was full rebuild, going to suck for years. Drew Lock is horrible. We got no hope. Now, it's been a couple weeks now since the whole Russell Wilson bombshell has happened. Clearly, we're not done feeling the effects of it, and it's going to be several stages here of continuing to process this as the months come along. And of course, it's going to all reignite itself when it actually gets close to the football season. But and I have still planning to work on that music video that I have been talking about, a song for Russell Wilson that I think encapsulates a lot of people's feelings about how that all went down. So look for that coming up soon, hopefully before our Spokane trip, which we leave tomorrow. So obviously I got one day to do it. So how can a Seahawks fan be positive? So I was kind of challenged by this texting discussion back and forth. I'm trying to see, well, how can I possibly infuse this discussion and bring here's reasons to be optimistic about the Seahawks in 2022. Well, the way I would start out is, first let's look back at 2021, which was kind of the start of this whole thing sort of falling apart, right? 7-10, no playoffs, and then we lose Russell Wilson. But I would first start by going back to look at the bright side of 2021. Now, I've said this before, so pardon me for repeating some of the same arguments, but 17-game season, we went 7-10. Of those 10 losses, I need to double check for sure, but I believe in at least, I think all but 3 of those games, at some point we had the lead in all but 3 games. I think the 3 games we didn't were the Arizona home game, the Packers game where we didn't score at all, and the Pittsburgh Steelers game, which I think we only tied. We never actually took the lead. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that those 3 games, those are the only 3 games we never actually had the lead in. Meaning that of the 10 losses we had, take those 3 away, and we could have theoretically gone 14-3 because all those other games we had a chance to win. So it wasn't like we got blown out in every single game. Just bad luck, didn't finish, blah, 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 turnovers. So, and even that Packer game, which we didn't score any points on, we had a chance to win that game because we were only down by a field goal for like most of this game through like the third quarter. And then Russ throws an inexcusable interception to turn it over and kill our scoring position that we had. Anyway, not to diagnose all those games, but my point is, last year we could have been a playoff team. And Russell was gone for 4 of those games, and really probably came back at least 2, maybe 3 games too soon. So in a season where almost half of those games we either didn't have Russell or we didn't have Russell at his best, we still had the chance to do even better than our record said. So I think I want to start out by saying the Seahawks were 7-10 last year, but I don't really think we were truly a 7-10 team. Right? There's some teams where the record is really what they are, and there are other teams who've got an inflated record and they're not as good as the record says, and there are teams whose record they're not as bad as the record says. Yesterday, I think that was one of those weird deals where I think we were a little better than what our record was. So that said, clearly we know that the biggest change from last year to this is quarterback. And that's going to be the big question. We won't know the plan pretty much until the draft. I think the last domino to fall, and this is all going to be predicated on what happens next step. Obviously, all the big free agent moves that people were talking about, the Deshaun Watson thing, that's over. Matt Ryan, that briefly was a possibility, that's over. So the last remaining quarterbacks out there that people are still talking about, as asked earlier, Baker Mayfield, former number 1 pick. Also, there's Colin Kaepernick floating around out there, who was, by the way, seen. He had another throwing session with Aaron Fuller of the Seahawks over at the UW campus. More speculation to sort of put out there to make you wonder, what does this mean? And Gardner Minshew, I still get a lot of people saying we should get him. I think a lot of it because of the whole Washington connection. And people would just love to relive the excitement that they had when he was back at Wazoo with the whole mustache thing and all that. All right. So if none of those moves happen anytime soon, well, then we pretty much know the free agency move of those aren't going to happen. I guess they could potentially pick up Colin Kaepernick anytime they want because he's got no strings attached, no deals to work out with any other teams. He's just out there. So, but let's say none of those moves happen. Then there's only 2 things left. You're either rolling with whoever's on your staff right now, which currently is Jacob Eason and Drew Lock, and potentially if they bring back Geno Smith, who also is just sort of floating out there. The last thing we remember him and being in the news is because he had a DUI after the last game of the season when they got the win in Arizona. So that could be the plan for next year. That's just going to be one of those guys who's already in the building. Or the final one, could they make a move at quarterback in this year's draft at number 9, or do they trade down and try to get some other gem, which would be a little bit surprising given the quarterback draft this year, that you'd actually find any kind of diamonds in the rough later in the rounds. They would have to know something nobody else knows if that's the case. So I'm not real keen on the Baker Mayfield idea. I don't know. I don't know. When you've had a chance to see what's out there and see what he's done before, I don't know. I'm not convinced that he's the answer. And we're going to have to give up a lot, or at least salary, unless the Browns were willing to eat up some of that salary that he is still owed. So I'm not sworn on that one. Kaepernick is a wild card. He hasn't played in so many years, 6 years. And even before he stopped playing for reasons that were not on the field, he wasn't even a starter. He got demoted. He'd been pretty bad the years leading up to that. So I think people have kind of amnesia about his actual playing and only remember the reason he's not in the league for something that had nothing to do with his play. They forget about his play itself, which had diminished quite a bit. He's still probably a very athletic guy. He clearly in 10 years, he's probably not the fast, fleet-of-foot guy he was when he bust out in the scene, running all up and down, doing the read option, much like Russell. When he first came out, he was running all over the place. He doesn't run as much anymore. So that part of his game is probably missing as well. So what's left? Well, does he still have what's between the ears? I never thought that was his strong suit. He's got a pretty strong arm, but as we know, it's a lot more than that. So, Gardner Minshew. Seems like a lot of people feel like he's got the stats to back it up. Would probably be the least, of the names out there. Would be a pretty low-risk move. I guess you could bring him in for competition. I'd be open to seeing him because I feel like he hadn't really had a chance with a team with with a decent team around him. So maybe there's more to him. Kind of like the Drew Lock thing. That's why I kind of put him and Drew Lock similarly in the same kind of level, because Drew Lock also had a good start his very first season, and then with changes that happened, coordinators moving and things like that, it just seemed like the situation went bad, much like Gardner Minshew went kind of bad in the sense that he never really got a fair shake. So what does that mean for what's left? If you draft, I saw more videos of Malik Willis throwing the ball $1 million down the field. But again, it's like there's no plays to dissect. There's no rush to contend with. There's no stress of the moment that you can evaluate. Just this guy's play and catch. So I don't know about that. Now the Seahawks, obviously, I have to lean on them to know what they're looking for, because they've got guys whose full-time job is to scout talent. And that you would think they would know a lot more than any of us do, because they're looking at all kinds of tape. They're watching them in person. They're looking at the combine stuff. They're talking with coaches who they played for. So they're going to have the intel that none of us have. So I would like to think they're a better judge of talent to know whether this is going to be a fit. But the question now is, going forward, and I asked this yesterday, do we need an elite quarterback to succeed? So it kind of goes back to, well, what do we expect out of the Seahawks this year? And what can we have hope for? Given that I don't think any of those quarterback names mentioned, any of them guarantee any kind of success. Let's just back it up one more step. All right, so we had Russell Wilson. We've had him for 10 years before he finally left. And we have all had our issues with Russell Wilson. I'm just as loyal I had been just as loyal to Russell Wilson and defending his back like as the next person. But there are a lot of times I'm going, "Doggone it, Russ, what are you doing? How do you miss that throw? Or how do you not see that guy in the middle? Why are you not taking the check down?" Which I'm convinced, had he done those things, we may have won a couple more games last year. Now, will that repeat itself? I think it's hard to really know what's the situation between Russ and what led to decisions that were on the field, and how much this is just Russ doing Russ things. But I'm really curious about the Denver scenario. Obviously, for multiple reasons, I don't want Russ to be successful in Denver. Part of it's just emotional, but a lot of it is practical. I said this before, next year, if the Broncos do poorly, or the worse they do, the better that first round pick next year gets. So obviously, you don't want to be picking at the bottom. That means they won the Super Bowl, and we're picking number 32 with that first round pick. Just like the Jets were hoping we would suck this year, we're in that same position because they have our first round pick in 2022. So we didn't finish last, but we certainly finished worse than we ever have since Russell Wilson came here. So many reasons to wish for that. But again, going back to Seattle, I'm taking a long time to get to my reasons to be positive. So let's go right back to it. Let's get back to this team in 2022. So we know the quarterback situation, but let's look at the other position groups and see, are there any reasons to feel good about why this team could be better in 2022? I'll start with the running game. All right. Technically, we have the same pieces at number 1 and number 2 as we did last year. So some people might argue, we're no better at the running back position than we were last year. Well, the difference is we've never had both of them on the field healthy at the same time, right? If it wasn't Carson who was banged up, it was Penny who was banged up. If it wasn't Penny banged up, it was Carson who was banged up. And if it wasn't one, it might have been both. And we had to roll with Alex Collins or somebody else. So we have yet to see the two of them on the field at the same time. They will have that opportunity, assuming that Carson's neck injury and surgery are no longer an issue. So the two of them in the backfield at the same time could alone by itself be, everything that was missing last year, because that was the plan. That was built around last year to be the plan. So big if, but if these guys are both on the field, and Penny, 4 out of the 6 games he started when he returned in December healthy, he ran for over 100 yards, tore it up, right? Chris Carson wasn't around at that time. But imagine if you could have both of those two, the thunder and lightning. Carson's the thunder, and Rashad Penny's the lightning. If you can have those two guys together, to me, that takes a lot of pressure off the would-be quarterback, whoever that might end up being. And it's the heart of what Pete Carroll wants to do. Run the ball and then be efficient with the passing game. So I feel like if you have those running backs, you can plug and play guys a lot easier than if you don't have the running game and you're expected to do some kind of pass-heavy offense and throw some okay quarterback in there. So the quarterback really has to be a point guard. And I liken it to why I feel like the offense could be okay. With Waldron, I feel like we really haven't seen that fully. I feel like the second year is going to be more of what he wants to run, or I should say run or pass. And I think the short passing game, which isn't really what Russell wanted to do, I think would make it more like what we saw with Jared Goff and the Rams. They went to the Super Bowl. Jared Goff is horrible. He's a terrible quarterback. And somehow he made that work, but mostly because he had a good running game. That was during the Todd Gurley heyday. And a lot of quick passes, a lot of short stuff, crossing routes. And we've said this many times on the show, that Russell Wilson, I do think there's a reality to why he doesn't throw those short intermediate routes in the middle, is because he may not see them. And if you get any of the other quarterbacks who are potentially in line to take his spot, we won't have that issue because none of these guys are short like Russell. So that might answer a lot of the things that have driven me crazy for all these years having Russ, because when you see Tom Brady and all these guys hitting those short routes, and why we weren't doing it more often, maybe it was Russ himself that didn't allow that to happen. Not that he couldn't watch him, he wasn't able to as easily as these other guys. So I feel like that could open things up. A receiving core, look at it this way too. Last year we won our opening game, and we did actually have both Penny and Carson on the field, because Penny did have some touches in that game, not much. But Eskridge was in that game, Carson was in that game. We were about as healthy as we've been the entire year, and we won that game. Things kind of unraveled after that, and it was like, what happened to that game? What happened to that team who was in the first game against the Colts? So here we are back now, 2022, and I feel like a lot of stuff that we didn't get production-wise, we might be able to get from a quarterback who is less talented than Russ, who won't throw the deep ball as well as Russ, but I think this short passing game could be the key. Run the ball well, short intermediate plays, and I've said if you get DK Metcalf the football in space, he could do a lot of the work for you and make a 10-yard pass, 8-yard pass look like a 40-yard pass, because he's going to be so good and run after the catch. One of those things that I never understood why they didn't do more to get the ball to him in short space. Don't bother throwing down the field all the time. Let him get it on the yards after catch. Ty Lockett, of course, is going to be a factor, and that Russell Wilson connection was special. Can he get that with another quarterback? We'll find out. Ty Lockett's never had another quarterback to throw to him. So is it just something special with Russ, or does Ty Lockett have that transcending ability to make any quarterback look good because he's so good at running routes? We won't know, but we will this year. I see a lot of people commenting about the Russ not throwing to the middle, was because he couldn't or he didn't want to. So I think Russ inherently was always looking for the bigger deal. It kind of encapsulates sort of his perspective on his legacy in the game and why he left Seattle. He's always been looking for that something bigger. And I think for him, I think he really did want to stay in Seattle in the beginning. And at some point, I think he felt like he was handcuffed by the organization, tired of not getting MVP votes, and, obviously winning. But all that, I think, took priority. And he wanted to go to a place where he can pad and bolster his stats, where he'll be rewarded by throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game and getting big numbers. And he just didn't see it happening in Seattle. So to me, that was a move. See, and I said this before, if you parallel the career of Tom Brady and Russell Wilson, obviously the big difference is that Brady won 3 Super Bowls in his first 5 years. But he went on a long drought, if you guys recall, from 2005. He didn't make it, or didn't win a Super Bowl. He made it to 2 Super Bowls and lost to the Giants. And he didn't win again until he played us in Super Bowl 49. He had a long stretch of 10 years where he didn't win a Super Bowl. And after that is when he went crazy, won his next 4 that he got his rings. So I feel like Russ left when we were in that spot where it's kind of a slow period, but better times were coming up. But he obviously didn't see it that way. Okay, Patrick, super chat. I want to ignore you. Norb, what are the advantages of having a 3-4 defense? Good question. I've been asking that myself because I need to do a little more research into the fundamental difference. I know how the scheme looks. You got 3 down linemen and 4 linebackers. So you have a nose tackle and 2 tackles or ends on each side, plus 4 linebackers. So sometimes you have 2 of those linebackers line up like defensive ends. So it just changes the alignments differently for the other teams. But I feel like I can't answer that one well right now because I'm not as fundamentally familiar with the ins and outs. Maybe somebody else can explain it in the chat if they're watching. But from talking to my friend Pat, he was telling me about, as a former center, in a 4-3, you don't have anybody typically lined up on the center because you got the vehicle in this off-road. I rarely see vehicles here. You passing through? Let me stop it. Let's let this guy go through. Beautiful day. Look at that. Look at that power lines and the sunrise going over. Are you passing? Are you going through? Or are you stopping? In a minute. We're going to take some pictures. Okay, got it. Taking some pictures. Beautiful day to take some pictures. All right. So, where was I? Oh, 3-4. So, in a 3-4, you got a nose tackle lined up over the center. So, depending on the alignment, we take advantage of some mismatches. And we do have some pretty good guys at nose tackle now with Shelby Harris from the Broncos. You got Al Woods, Puna Ford. These guys are all back with the team. So I like how it's shaping up on the 3-4 side. And I feel like this could open up uses of Jamal Adams in that 3-4, where maybe he could play a little bit of that outside linebacker position and be one of those edge rushers, even though he's technically a safety. So I feel like that could be tied in, but I need to look into that a little bit more detail. All right, so going back to the whole Russ thing. So we already talked about the middle of the field, but let's look at the other position groups. All right, so receiving group, we are as good as we were, and no major upgrades at this point, but the Eskridge will hopefully be healthy in his second year. And if he can bring things that I think they brought him here for by drafting him first, that stuff's coming. We already know what we got from Lockett and DK. So I think our receiving core is good. Can always get better with potential other draft moves. So, but I'm not worried about receiver. So I go to tight end. So Gerald Everett is gone. 1 year experiment. He had a mixed year. I think we all expected a little bit more from him in kind of the same way that we expected a lot more from Jimmy Graham when he first came here. because we just remember what that teams did with that particular weapon against us. And while Gerald Everett had a pretty good year overall, let this guy get by me. Wow, I think he had a overall pretty good year. I think the overall thing is that he had some good games and he had some bad games too. Where remember that game where he like fumbled the ball at the goal line? Like one we got intercepted, another one he just dropped. I think we ended up winning that game, but man, he made it a lot more closer than it had to be. And that was against the 49ers at home. But so there's, he had an okay year, maybe pretty good year. But we get Noah Fant from the Broncos now. I feel like that's a wash, maybe slight upgrade from Gerald Everett. And again, coupled with a different quarterback. Now, let's say if it is Drew Lock, right? If they roll with him and see what he can do, he at least is familiar with Noah Fant, and maybe this will get better production out of the tight end, because the tight end feels like a position that in the Russell Wilson era, we've just never quite developed that tight end quarterback connection. I don't know what it is, but you have all these other teams with that combination. You have Brady to Gronk, you got Mahomes to Kelsey. You had like Romo to Witten, those types of almost, your tight end is almost that guy that if all else fails, you can always count on the tight end to get you like 7 or 8 yards down the seam or in a kind of turnaround hook route or something. For some reason, it just never clicked with any of the tight ends we have. We never really had, even with Jimmy Graham. I mean, he ended up being pretty prolific over the years, but it just seemed like it's such a struggle to get that going. And maybe this will be one of the better combinations of our soon-to-be quarterback and tight end group. So that's a hope that something that hasn't happened yet maybe will happen. So that's tight end. All right, now to the negative side. Kind of. The offensive line. Are we worse or better than last year? Well, we did get improved in the center position, which is obviously a very important one. We got the former Chief, former Ram in there. And we've been kind of just rolling with what we got at center for a while. Really have been doing that since, well, people say since Max Unger. But I think Justin Britt is underrated and often forgotten. He was one of those guys who was kind of like Ethan Posick in the same way, where Justin Britt started out, I think he played a little bit of guard, played a little bit of tackle, seemed to be like a guy who couldn't find his way. Suddenly he found the center, and he was pretty solid. And unfortunately, on the last year of his deal, he gets hurt, injured, and ends up having to leave the Seahawks, which has happened with a lot of guys. I think of Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, just to name a couple. But so that's the, I think that's an upgrade. It's nice to see them address that issue with a proven commodity and not some conversion project. But we got Damon Lewis. I mean, I feel like the sides are pretty good. And again, what's his name? His name, Sir Kerham, was the guy on the right tackle. I think he's going to be grabbing that spot. Anyway, so I feel like, and again, based on, if you look at the performance last year, at the end of the year, we were definitely getting run blocking that was working. And we won most of those games. Should have been in Chicago. That sucked. But, the offense actually looked pretty good. So you got to take some of that momentum with you. So Dwayne Brown has not yet signed with anybody. So I guess there's still potential they can work something out. That's probably the biggest concern, is who's going to be left tackle? Who's the guy anchoring down the most important non-center position on the offensive line? There's no answer right there at the moment for that guy. But Dwayne Brown wasn't exactly Walter Jones either. A lot of missed blocks. He had some, penalties. And so that's going to be a position they really need to address. So outside of that, the offense is pretty good, and in some ways better than where it was, quarterback aside, of course. But there's even reasons to think that we, even with a lesser quarterback, non-elite, there might be plays that we haven't been having because our elite quarterback, Russell Wilson, as we know, there's certain things that he does really well, and there's some things he doesn't do well. And what I'm hoping the Seahawks will continue to develop, because they still haven't done it and never got it going in the Russell Wilson era. They got to get a screen game going. They've got to figure out how to throw the screen. And as we know, Russell Wilson, a lot of the issues with him is he does get sacked a lot. He could blame the line, but you can also blame the quarterback for not getting rid of the ball to those check downs, across the middle plays, or quick release. And because he's looking for the deep ball or scrambling out to try to extend plays, the line can't just do a traditional pocket protection. He's rolling out of there, so holding happens, and he gets sacked. So again, you take the good with the bad, but that was some of the bad that we won't have moving forward. That could actually be some addition by subtraction. It's like you subtract some of those crazy plays that Wilson was doing, and it might actually help make the offense a little more boring, but potentially a little more predictably good. All right, so now to the defensive side of the ball. Let's start with the inside out. I talked a little bit about the 3-4 scheme and the change in personnel. It was sad to see all these pass rushers get released. Benson Mayoa, Carlos Dunlap, Kerry Hyder, who, by the way, just announced he went back to the 49ers. All of them pretty much underachieved. Carlos Dunlap came on in the latter part of the season, like Penny did when things didn't matter and the playoffs were pretty much out of reach. But there was also the scheme, which I did not understand what the hell they were doing, dropping back offensive linemen into coverage as often as they did. I get doing it once in a while to fake a blitz or something. But when you got Poona Ford covering OBJ on an out route, and almost gets an interception on a ball that went off his hands. But obviously you're not going to get pass rush if your pass rushers are dropping back in coverage. Makes no sense. And now, we have been the worst defense at the beginning of the last 2 seasons under Ken Norton Jr. And a lot of people, myself included, feeling like the change was necessary. That change happened. We can't be any worse than we've been to start off a year the last couple of seasons. So I would like to think we can only get better. So from a coaching standpoint and it's just overall scheme, I feel like we got to be able to move in a positive direction from where we came from, because again, when you're in the worst, you really can't be any worse. I guess you could, but we're in last place, so it's only up from here. So I'm hoping that the defensive scheme will, they said, our new coordinator, saying Clint Hurt, says he's going to be more aggressive, less of that passive zone stuff that was driving us crazy the first quarter or third of the season, where guys were just wide open with no one around them. So as far as the defensive line, still need a lot of more guys in there. But I feel like, as my buddy Pat mentioned, as he watched a lot of the combine more than I did, he said he saw a lot of really fast, athletic defensive linemen in this draft. While it may not be a quarterback draft, there's a lot of good defenders, particularly on the defensive line, that I think Seattle can benefit from. So that's a need, but I think there's potential to get some bodies in there that could really help us out. All right, so from line, we go to linebacker. Obviously, we all know that Bobby Wagner left. He's potentially talking to the Rams, which would really suck. Bobby Wagner potentially joining the Rams, but nothing official at this point. But linebacker, Jordan Brooks, obviously now steps in. Cody Barton could be stepping up in that position to compete. I feel like they're going to have to also address, now in the 3-4, they're going to have to address more of the linebacking positions in there. I was sad to see Bobby go. I said before, financially, I knew that this was not going to happen this year unless somebody worked, unless they made some changes and worked things out. Now, whether they even tried to, maybe it wasn't even discussed, don't know. It sounds like not much was discussed prior to Bobby being released, if you were to follow the breadcrumb trails, the way things went down. So it seemed like they were just ready to move on from him. And while I think he was still good, there was that reality of feeling like, he had stepped down, had taken a step behind. He had a lot of tackles, but a lot of those tackles were down the field. He wasn't getting as many of those back behind the line of scrimmage type tackles. Often a step behind in coverage. So I understand it. That's why I wasn't as heartbroken when Bobby Wagner was released. So, but I still got to address the hole that the hole that needs to be filled. Okay. So, corner, the positives. Let's go with the negative. Negative is DJ Reed. Really wanted him back. Him and Quadri Diggs were two guys I really was hoping they could find a way to get done. They got one of them done, but couldn't get Reed done. Apparently insulted by their offer. So they just clearly weren't going to give him as much money as he'd hoped for. So, but they do have Trey Brown. I thought he looked good until he got injured. So Trey Brown hopefully will be, don't know the extent how soon he can get back on the field, but really like what he showed in terms of his skill set and promise of years to come here. So Trey Brown's there. Sidney Jones, he also played well, I thought, in the time he had before. He also was off the field. So I like those two guys. Again, they're not like number one, number two. Trey Brown, I think, could be number two. I feel like, though, we're missing our number one. You know, we've had, after Shaquille Griffin was gone, you know, DJ Reed was kind of that guy, but I feel like we still could use at least one more solid corner in there that could be a game changer. So could that be in the draft? Is there somebody else still floating around out there? Probably not floating around because number one lockdown corners don't grow on trees. So that could be like the left tackle, biggest concern. So then you go to safety, and, you know, you've got Jamal Adams. You're kind of stuck with that, if you like it or not. I still think that they could get better usage out of him and make that value feel worth it. And Quadri Diggs, been saying he needs to come back, and I'm glad he had a chance to go with a lot of other teams, and he came back, even knowing that Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner weren't going to be here. So I do like him here, and hopefully he'll continue to deliver as he had all his time with the Seahawks. All right, and then we go, you know, for special teams. Yeah, Jason Myers had kind of a crappy year last year, missed a lot of key field goals, some that probably led to some games that probably some games we could have won had he converted a few more field goals or extra points. But I think he'll return to his previous form. That's not his player card stats. That's kind of an anomaly. And of course, Michael Dixon should have been MVP for the Seahawks anyway. We know what he can do. So, and there you go. I mean, that's kind of in a nutshell, you know, the whole Seahawks squad, kind of position group by position group. So obviously we're not like the Rams where it's like we're stacked from top to bottom and went out and bought every single stud at every position. We've got some holes, that's for sure. But I think what I'm most optimistic about is that while the quarterback change was the most devastating move, I also think that it could result in some of the biggest benefits that we didn't really expect because we got so used to seeing what Russell Wilson does in his own game, and we just sort of got used to that. But we're going to miss all the great stuff that he does, obviously. But we're also going to be able to say goodbye to the stuff we don't like, whether that be off the field or the stuff on the field. And it might be refreshingly different and maybe even boringly productive with a different quarterback. At least that's what I'm hoping for, because certainly can't get the replacement. Deshaun Watson, from a physical standpoint, probably the only guy who can really match him. Mahomes is probably, you know, is a step above. But so we'll see how it all plays out. But more surprises, I'm sure, around every corner. Are the Seahawks done picking up guys? We will find Addison. Yeah, Mr. Unlimited. Probably one of the worst posts he ever put out there. Yeah, the cringe factor often high when it comes to our buddy Russ, and now it feels extra cringy anytime we see a post of him in orange and blue. Anyway, that's the biz. But again, look for this video. I'm hoping to get this music video out by tomorrow. And, you know, we'll continue to post as more developments happen along the way. Been a very, very interesting offseason for sure. Anyway, I'm out of here, guys. Have a great rest of your Thursday. And we will talk to y'all later.